I just went on a journey to try and get my great-grandfather's death certificate changed. It was one of the most frustrating experiences of my entire life. I've never spent so much time in government office buildings, and I don't even know if it worked. So let's back up with a little background. For those that don't know, I'm applying for Italian citizenship, and this would be dual citizenship with America and Italy. I've been doing this process for about 2 years, and yes, just the paperwork has taken this long. So when we sent our initial paperwork to an Italian lawyer, so this was like birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, the lawyer came back with some suggestions of things you can correct on these certificates that would make our case stronger. We got everything changed except for my great-grandfather's death certificate. And when we were talking with the local government, they said that you would need a court order for the Department of Records to change the death certificate. So I thought, no big deal, we'll get everything and just send it up there and they'll do it. Well, in talking with the court, you actually have to be in person. And I don't live in the state where my great-grandfather died. No, none of my relatives live in the state where my great-grandfather died. So that meant somebody in his bloodline had to go to the state where he died to file a court order. I volunteered. I really regret it now, but I did. And this is the story of how it went terribly. And I don't even know if it's going to get done, but here's the entertaining story nonetheless. So I show up to the state where my great-grandfather died, and I show up to the courthouse, and keep in mind, I flew here. It cost me about $500 to fly to this place, and I was going to be there for 3 business days, Wednesday through Friday. I flew in on a Wednesday morning, and I was going to leave on a Saturday, and I figured that was more than enough time, and the initial plan was get the court order, get the Department of Records to make the changes, and then his death certificate actually resides in the archives, and so then it would be to get the archives to give me his death certificate. I showed up to the courthouse, and I showed them what I was trying to do, and they were like, yeah, we do this all the time, no problem, fill out this paperwork. I filled it out, and they're like, okay, your court date's gonna be in 10 days. And I was like, excuse me? Like, I don't live here. So not only did the whole 10-day thing scare me, but I also didn't know I had to appear in court. So that was something else entirely. And so she was like, well, you have to come back in 10 days. And I was like, I can't, I don't live here. And I said, you're telling me I have to fly back here in 10 days? And she was like, yeah. And so I was really upset, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And she said, let me go look. After a lot of, back and forth with her coworkers and whatever, she got me a court date in 2 days. So that was like Friday afternoon. So I was like, great, I will be there. So then I get my court order filed, and I have a notice, and she's like, well, typically, you have to go to the sheriff's department and then give them this notice, and then they serve the records department and tell them they have to appear in court. And she's like, but you don't have that much time because your hearing's in 2 days. So you just take this yourself and drop it off to the Department of Records. And she told me where they were, and with my luck, they were closing in 30 minutes, and it took about 25 minutes to get there. So I'm booking it down the highway, and I show up. I literally run into the room, and I'm like, hi, I'm here. I'm trying to change my great-grandfather's death certificate, and I have a court order, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, we don't take these here. And I said, well, then who does? You're the Department of Records, and I'm supposed to give this to the Department of Records. And she said, no, you have to give it to our lawyer's office, and they are in a different building in downtown, which is where I was. So at that point, all the offices had closed, and I went home defeated. So the next morning, I woke up early, drove to the lawyer's office, handed them this paper that said there was going to be a court hearing the next day, and they were like, fine. Fast forward to the next day, I'm getting ready for my court hearing. I've never been so freaking nervous in my life because I've never appeared in court. I show up to the place, and I say to the lady, hi, I'm here. I have a court hearing at 2. Here's my paperwork. And she said, okay. And she starts looking me up in the system. And then she's like, oh, you're not on the docket today. And I said, here's my paperwork right here. It says I have a court hearing at 2. And she's like, yeah, I see that. And I see we signed it. So we'll see what we can do. So she's talking to her coworkers again. So she's like, okay, we emailed the courtroom clerk and we sent her your information. So just go down there. And I said, do I walk in the courtroom? Do I wait outside? Like, I don't know what to do. She said, go downstairs and wait outside on the benches, and they'll call you when they're ready. And I said, great. So I headed downstairs. I sat on those benches for like 20 minutes. Not a single person was going in and out of the courtroom, and no one was really down there. And finally, this lawyer came and sat beside me, and I asked her, I said, look, I don't know if I'm supposed to go in there or not. They told me to wait out here, but nothing's happening, and it's already 15 minutes past my court time. So she went in the courtroom, and she came back out, and she's like, yeah, just go in there. There's people in there. So I said, okay. I walked in there, and the courtroom clerk's like, Stephanie, are you Stephanie? And I was like, yeah. She's like, oh, we've been calling your name for the last 15 minutes. So I was like, thanks, I'm here. She gave me some form to look over, and I did, and I gave it back. And then it was time for my court hearing. I was so nervous. Like, I had to swear an oath, which was super nerve-wracking. So anyway, because I was not on the docket, the judge said, I have not had any time to review your papers since you were just added, so please explain to me what's going on. So I had to walk him through everything, which I did, and he was nice. And then the Department of Records showed up, and they said, oh, well, we don't disagree with why the things need to be changed, but we don't think we should be the ones to do it. And I was just like, excuse me? That's your job. And so then they proceeded to argue that because the document resides in the archives, the Department of Records shouldn't change it, the archives should. Even though that's not current procedure, they want to change it, I guess. And the judge honestly was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. So I was actually pretty upset that they showed up and pulled this on my case. I was like, this kind of stuff happens all the time. And you choose a court case from someone who doesn't live there and lives out of the state, and you just happen to pick my court case for this hissy fit. So I was pretty upset. So anyway, afterwards, I got the court order, and they told me go to the Department of Archives and give them the order and they'll change it. So I drive to the archives, and the guy at the archives was like, look, I can't take this. We don't do this. He said that's not the procedure. He was nice, and he explained that the procedure was the Department of Records gets the court order, and then they come over, make the changes, and then they give the changes to the archivist, and he records the changes in his system and can issue a certificate. But I was just so frustrated that I went through all this just to go pretty much back to the beginning, and there's still no clear path for me to get this death certificate changed. I got nowhere close to what I wanted on my trip. I spent my whole time just dealing with this court order, and I don't know who's going to change it or what's going to happen. I did send the court order to the Vital Records Department, and they seemed to be okay with accepting it. We'll see how it goes, and I'll keep you updated, because this is the very last thing I need before I go to Italy. So I really hope it goes smoothly and that I can go to Italy soon. But I will keep you updated on what happens, and hopefully I get this death certificate changed soon.